Welcome to Chit Chatter with Rhea, the podcast that provides information to you about the legal and political process. Now here's your host, Rhea Chattergoon.
Welcome back to Chit Chatter, guys. So it's been a rough few weeks for me. I had a death in the family. I had to travel unexpectedly to Trinidad to bury one of my favorite uncles. And, you know, it's rough. It's rough as you get older. It also means that your elders get older. And these things are going to happen. I come from a very big family. And so my cousins and I were talking about, you know, we've just got to sort of expect this going forward, that this is where we're going to see each other at funerals because our parents are just getting older and it's inevitable, you know? And it's a tough thing to deal with. It really is a part of life that is difficult to come to terms with. In the middle of all of that, I had a 4-day evidentiary hearing that's still not over with the most disagreeable opposing counsel I have ever encountered in my career. I cannot wait to tell you guys about this case once it's over. I've already gotten my client's permission. You know, win, lose, or draw, I will tell you about it. It's a difficult case. It's a employment discrimination, race, and age case, and it's up against one of the top 5 firms in the country, and they are playing big law games. And I know what that is because I worked in big law, but for some reason they're still continuing to do it with me, and it's just made the case even more difficult. Also, my dog Bailey stopped walking last week. We had to rush her to the ER. We thought we were going to lose her. We finally got her on some good medication, and they seem to be working. A week ago, I thought I was going to have to make a very, very difficult, heart-wrenching decision in the middle of my uncle's funeral because, you know, when it rains, it pours. And at least I have experience in life dealing with that. I think it's prepared me in these times to be solid and not just completely fall apart, unfortunately. But it's life. It's life, and we've just got to deal with it. But there's a lot of things going on, so I wanted to jump on here and record. I do have a guest today, Christopher Lomax, who, in addition to being just a phenomenal person, he's a fantastic lawyer, and we actually co-counsel on, I think this is the second case now. But Chris he started his career with the Department of Justice, and then went on to work for Jones Day, which is one of the top 5 firms in the country. But prior to going to Jones Day, Chris worked for the Department of Justice in the Civil Rights division, and he successfully prosecuted law enforcement officers who violated people's constitutional rights. He's gone on to start his own firm. He's doing very well. I will say he's one of the easiest people I've worked with, and very just a smart person. But I'm bringing Chris on to the podcast because I think he has better working knowledge of the federal criminal court than I do, and would give you a better insight into Trump's indictment. So, you know, sometimes we are not experts in everything, and thankfully we have friends who are. So I'm happy to have Chris on. But unless you've been under a rock, I assume you have heard about Trump's 37 felony count indictment. And what he has been indicted for is for mishandling of classified documents, obstructing justice, and making false statements. He was arraigned this past Tuesday in Miami. And I hope you Google the indictment and read it for yourself. There's some pretty damning things in there. And it's long. It's about 40-something pages, I believe. But the indictment, what stood out to me was the indictment alleges that he shared a classified map relating to an ongoing military operation. So yes, we have improperly stored classified documents in the bathroom at Mar-a-Lago, and all of the just ridiculous handling of these documents, right? Setting that aside, he is alleged to have shared a classified map relating to ongoing military operation that puts not only our military at risk, but puts our country at risk. This is a national security issue. He is alleged to have documents that include information regarding nuclear operations that are classified, so much so that they're classified as Five Eyes only. What does that mean? It means exactly what you think it means, which is that only a few people see this information. And why that is because they're national security risks. So, look, at the end of the day, we can argue back and forth about who's racist and what policies are racist and, GOP versus Democrat. But national security should be something that we are all on the same page with, right? There is no doubt in my mind. This is my opinion. This is just my opinion. This is not a fact, and it hasn't been alleged. But I would not be surprised, and I don't think a lot of people would be surprised if Trump wasn't selling our secrets to our enemies. That's just how I feel. Feel free to disagree with me. I think there's just been enough evidence leading down to that path. And like I said, Trump's presidency, in addition to just showing me how racist America is, it has really opened my eyes into what happens behind the doors, right? And I joke around that I have now become, a potential conspiracy theorist, but it's hard to sort of ignore some of the things in your face. The case has been assigned to Aileen Cannon. I have talked about Aileen Cannon on this podcast before. She is a very inexperienced judge that was nominated, almost handpicked by Trump. How she got this assignment, you may be wondering. So it's actually random. The judges are assigned cases on a sort of wheel, right? We are actually down one judge, rest in peace, Marcia Cook. Marcia Cook, I'm sorry. And, she was a fantastic judge. She passed away and we're still trying to fill that. But so the judges are just backed up because they're also taking over her caseload. But these judges are assigned at random. I will tell you, whenever I file a federal case, I cross my fingers and hope not to get certain judges. Sometimes that doesn't happen. I don't think this was purposeful. I think it went with the procedure of the court. The chief judge right now in the Southern District of Florida is one of my favorite judges. And I say that to say she has ruled against me numerous times. But I have a lot of respect for her. She's always solid in her reasoning. And even if I disagree with her, I can say, I can see her point. I do think she is of the caliber of what a Supreme Court justice should be. And I've said it before. I hope she is nominated at some point and that she takes on that nomination. Her name, by the way, is Judge Cecilia Altanaga. Whip smart lady. I mean, just ridiculously smart. In other news with this indictment, what I did find interesting was Trump's attorney, Chris Keiss, I believe his name is. He is a well-known lawyer within the GOP circles. He has represented DeSantis. He used to be Florida's Solicitor General. He's won multiple victories in the U.S. Supreme Court. Not surprising because we have a very biased Supreme Court. But he has very close ties to Florida Republican politicians. And I mean, his reputation is good. He is very competent. He's very serious. He's very smart. He is being paid by the Save America PAC, which is a PAC who supports Trump and DeSantis and places a lot of money in their pockets. He required, and this is the part that I find funny, not funny, but good for him. He required a $3 million retainer to bill against. And why is that important? Well, one of the ways that you can cease representation of a client after, they've signed and after you represent them is that they've ceased paying their bills. We know Trump has a reputation for not paying his bills, whether it's the plumber who worked at Mar-a-Lago or lawyers in the past. He has stopped paying them. So this was very smart of Chris to get his money up front. In his notice of appearance, which is on the docket, you can pull it up and read it, Chris stated specifically that he would not withdraw from the case for failure of his client to pay fees. And that was interesting. I have never seen that in a notice of appearance before. Most lawyers would reserve their right to withdraw from a case if they're not being paid, because who wants to work for free? But it's interesting. It's interesting. Chris is a very competent guy. Is he going to put his license on the risk, at risk, I should say, for Trump? No, I will tell you he will not. And so, irreconcilable differences is a reason for an attorney to withdraw from representation. And I could see that happening in the future, just because we know how unhinged Trump can be. Aileen Cannon has not recused herself from the case. I don't think she will unless asked. The government hasn't asked yet. There's no reason for her to just yet. She hasn't shown any bias in any of her decisions. We know she received a huge smackdown from a very conservative 11th Circuit a while back on another issue brought against Florida and the GOP. So we'll see. It's yet to be seen. The magistrate who arraigned Trump on Tuesday is one of my favorites. Again, very tough judge, has ruled against me, but he's very by the book, and he doesn't play games, and he doesn't care who you are. I will say that. I have gone up against some very experienced lawyers from some very well-known firms in front of him, and this is Jonathan Goodman, the magistrate. And I will say Judge Goodman has been fair. He doesn't care who you are. Once you're prepared and you're making good arguments, that's what he's listening to, and that's what judges should be. That's what we hope they should be. So whether Cannon recuses herself is yet to be seen. What else is going on? The Supreme Court on last Thursday, I was out of the country, but I saw the news and I actually went back to read it this morning, upheld a 1978 law aimed at keeping Native American adoptees with their tribes and with their traditions. Interestingly, Amy Coney Barrett, aka the Handmaiden, wrote for the majority and affirmed the power of Congress to make laws about Native American tribes and child welfare. What it didn't do was resolve a question of whether the law discriminated against non-Native families based on race. The vote was 7-2. Of course, Clarence Thomas and Justice Alito dissented on the case. No surprise there. So what was the case about? The case was a white foster couple from Texas adopted a Native American child, and 5 tribes actually intervened and filed this lawsuit under the act. And that's because the act gives preference to Native American families to adopt and to be placed on in foster care. And so the white couple from Texas said that it violated the equal protection principles because it hinged placement based on race. Now, the tribes argued that they were political entities, not racial groups. And so they argued that could imperil, if the Supreme Court justice ruled in favor of this couple from Texas, it could affect almost every aspect of Indian law and policy, including govern to access, land, water, gambling, that sort of thing. So the Supreme Court dismissed the equal protection argument, saying that the party didn't have legal standing, and then it focused on the legal standing of Congress to make laws about the tribes. I could talk a lot about that because we know how Congress treats these tribes. But it's interesting that this is the same court that ruled in the Dobbs case under equal protection laws, and now it's giving another case under the same equal protection laws. Now, they did discuss standing, et cetera, so they really didn't reach the equal protection argument. But I say that to say this is how cases are determined using the same law. And so this is why I love the law and why I think it's so interesting to understand how decisions are made for the average person. Again, this is why I wanted to do this podcast, because decisions can be made one way or the other using the same law depending on the arguments made. So a win for our Native American brothers and sisters. I think this was important because if you allow adoption of these children, which we know a lot of them are being trafficked, we know there's a long history in this country of kidnapping Native American children and transitioning them, I should say, into Christianity by the Catholic Church. There's just a long history in this country. And if you get a chance, I think I mentioned it on the podcast before, there's a show. It's based out of Canada, though, but same premise of the taking of Native American children by the church and what they did and how they tortured these children into changing their views and making them Christians. And it's called Three Pines on Amazon, and they're not making a season 2, which I'm very upset about because it was a really, really well-written show. Speaking of churches, this week, the Southern Baptist Convention upheld an expulsion of a megachurch in California that was led by a female pastor. And essentially, this pastor, by the way, had been the pastor for more than 3 decades, okay? The Southern Baptist Convention basically said that only qualified men can serve as pastors, and the members voted to uphold this church's removal from the convention. There is nothing in the Bible, and please feel free to correct me on this if I'm wrong. As far as I know, there is nothing in the Bible that prohibits a woman from preaching or from holding any position in the church. This is a man-made rule. This is why I have issues with the Southern Baptists. And let me tell you this, my in-laws belonged at one point to the Southern Baptist Convention. Their church did. One of my best friends and ex-roommate from college, her dad is a retired pastor now, and was part of the Southern Baptist Convention. And we have had many, many disagreements about what that church stands for and just how conservative and misogynistic that church can be. So yeah, religion is a thing, isn't it? Religion is so interesting because it frames the way you think about things, and it frames your opinion until you start reading and really educating yourself. And they're so similar. So my uncle's funeral was a Hindu funeral, and during the service, I've only been to a couple Hindu funerals, but it was very interesting because some of the rituals that were occurring during the funeral was very similar to Jewish funerals. Some of the things that they had to do after the funeral was very similar to a Jewish funeral. And, sort of the what was said during the funerals was very similar as well. And I go back to saying, you study religion and you'll see how similar and not different it is. These man-made rules are what divides us, and it's up to us. I always say there's more than us. There's more of us than there are them, but no one listens to me. So I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir. What else happened this week? Oh, it was very interesting. DeSantis, who is on his now presidential kick, right? He's announced his presidency. He's announced he's running for president, and he's now campaigning. He is literally the most unlikable person ever. He's just not likable. Like, I don't think Trump is likable either, but I can see how stupid people, how he can appeal to stupid people, right? Because he just talks in nonsense and just throws out words. DeSantis is actually very, very educated. Of course, he is trying to dumb himself down. I mean, he's even mispronouncing his name at times. Who mispronounces their own name? But he's doing that in an attempt to appeal to the sector of people who are voting, by the way. These people are voting. But he's trying to dumb himself down. But this week, he signed a bill, HB 637, that bans direct-to-consumer vehicle sales. Basically, the dealership or dealer association lobbied, championed a bill that would prohibit most automakers from selling vehicles directly to buyers. This goes into effect on July 1st. Why is that important? Well, now for example, you go to Toyota and Toyota is offering a deal for you to buy a car or a truck directly from them, you have to now go to the dealership. You now have to deal with, the markups. Now, proponents of the bill claim that this is going to allow more competition. I call bullshit. I really call bullshit on that, because what it's going to do is create competition between the dealerships to make more money. It doesn't help the everyday consumer, right? It bars the reserving or incentivizing sales or lease of vehicles. Only 2 Democratic representatives voted no on this bill. Everyone else voted yes. I haven't contacted my specific representative to see why she voted yes on this bill. I will be. Marie Woodson, I'm coming to ask you. But Democratic reps Anna Eskamani and Angie Nixon both voted no. Everyone else voted yes. And so I'm interested in speaking with somebody who's going to tell me why they voted yes. Now, the exclusions to that, right? This is the interesting part. The exclusions to that exclude newer manufacturers like Tesla, Rivian. There was another one, starts with an L. They're authorized to have franchise dealer licenses for direct sales for these electric vehicles, if not prohibited under federal law. So, of course, Tesla was excluded. We know that Ron DeSantis had a flub with Elon Musk on Twitter to announce his presidency, but his run for presidency. So, again, pay for play here. What we do know is that the senator and the representative who championed this bill received, shortly after filing the bill, political donations from dealerships. And this is just public knowledge, right? Ileana Garcia, who's from Miami-Dade, got a number of donations to her specific quote-unquote nonprofit or political committee, I should say, from people like the Braham family who run a number of dealerships. I mean, this is all public knowledge. You can Google this for yourself, right? So, 18,000 here, 20,000 here, 50,000 here were donated after the filing of this bill. And so, again, dark money in our politics. You got the money, you're going to get what's done. I don't know why the Democratic reps voted for it. I will be asking questions, like I said. But again, another bill that does not help the average Florida citizen. And that's where we are, guys. That's, you get what you vote for. I keep saying that. I won't talk anymore because there's just so much going on, but I hope you enjoy the interview with Christopher Lomax, and please subscribe, follow us on Instagram, and share our podcasts. I'm doing a very, very bad job of my Instagram, TikTok, all of that. I've just got a lot going on and I need to do better, but I would appreciate your help in getting this podcast shared. Thanks, and I'll talk to you next time. Welcome to the show, Christopher Lomax. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fantastically well. Rhea, how are you?
I'm good. We act like we don't talk often. I already did the intro
Almost
for
every
you. I already told the listeners that we are co-counsel on a case. Actually, second case. The first one I got out of, though.
Yeah, you know what? That one might be over. I'll tell you about it.
Oh, great. I'm glad for you.
Thank you.
But tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
So I'm a South Florida native. I wasn't born in South Florida. I was randomly born in Louisville, Kentucky, but only because my father was doing a graduate program there at the time when I was born.
And you said it properly, Louisville.
That's right. See, you wouldn't know that unless you had some experience. You wouldn't know that. People say
one of my best friends from college is from Louisville, and she taught me how to say that properly freshman year.
Right. Yeah. So the one thing that I was able to take away is how to properly pronounce Louisville, Kentucky.
Yep.
So I was born there, but we moved to South Florida just before I turned 2 years old. So I lived here my entire childhood, grew up here. I went to the University of Miami, both for undergraduate and law school.
I'm sorry. As I sit here with my Florida State shirt on.
It's good. There has to be places for other people to go.
I knew that was coming. Why is it that every hurricane says that?
We understand. It's totally understandable. We're glad.
Well, I'm sorry you couldn't leave Miami and venture away.
I could not. It was too beautiful and too wonderful for me to leave. And look at you right here, back down here with me. So
I like the beach. What can I say?
Yep, that's what a lot of people say. So I did that, loved it so much, stayed for law school, and immediately after graduating, I moved to Washington, D.C., where I worked in the criminal section of the Civil Rights Division at the United States Department of Justice. My job there was to prosecute police officers who committed, crimes of excessive force. Obstruction of justice is something that we'll talk about today. Mm-hmm. Prosecute individuals who committed hate crimes and also human trafficking offenses.
That is like the dream. That's sort of like the dream job.
Yeah. It is the greatest job. Like it literally is the greatest job. I could have done it forever, but for the fact that I wanted to have a well-rounded experience as a young attorney and didn't want to necessarily be stuck doing one thing. But I didn't leave because I didn't love it. I just wanted to make sure that I was giving myself an opportunity to have some flexibility. But it was a wonderful job, a wonderful place to learn how to be a lawyer. And part of what gives me the knowledge base to be able to talk about, the Trump indictment and other things. Mm-hmm. So I did that, clerked for a federal judge on the Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, which is based in New Orleans, Louisiana. And then after getting married, I moved back to South Florida, and my wife is also an attorney. She's an assistant federal public defender. And we have 2 daughters who are 7 and 4.
And bilingual.
And bilingual, yes.
That's right, because I saw their little video last night. That was awesome.
Right. Yeah. So they get down in both English and Spanish, and we're trying to make sure that they are able to survive in South Florida, because that is one of the survival skills. So,
it really is. It really is. Oh, so your wife is an assistant public defender. Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Yeah, federal. So she actually knows a lot about, this federal criminal stuff. So like she helps make sure I'm understanding as well, because I did it on the other side. I was a prosecutor.
Right.
And so it's always great to have that perspective from her. And she's done that her entire career. So she started off in the Bronx Defender's Office, and then there was an opening in the Federal Defender's Office, and that's actually why we moved back to South Florida. She got the job here in Miami office of the Federal Defender. So
that's a big deal, because just any opening in the federal sector for U.S. attorneys or public defenders it's a hotbed. Like people are trying to get down here all the time.
Absolutely. So she was very blessed to get the job. And she had only been out for 3 years of law school. So,
Oh, wow.
and so she was, like, hey, I'll throw my name in the hat. She did, and it worked out.
Well, I thought you were smart before, but now I think you're really smart because you married smart. I always tell
Well, that's
men,
my
like,
greatest achievement. Yes.
I always tell men, I judge them by who they marry because
Yes. Oh yeah, if I was gonna get anything right, it would be that. And I definitely
good.
knew it. So
Good. And so after that, you moved to Jones Day, which for our listeners is a very large national, I want to say top 5 or 10 firms in the country.
Right.
Those are very difficult jobs to get as well.
Right.
They're also, those firms are not as diverse as we would like to see. I'm sure it wasn't when you were there. So
yeah.
So working in a non-diverse industry is difficult, as I know, having come from big law myself.
Yes, you did.
So you left.
I left, and then I started my own thing, and it had a lot to do with the fact that, as you start to become more senior, you need to really buy into and adopt the firm's viewpoints and principles. And so, nothing against them, but I have my own. And I really wanted to be able to work in a space where I could have a great level of fidelity to my own principles and viewpoints. And so I felt like, well, the only way for me to do that is to be the boss.
That's right.
so I, until something else happens, like I wasn't going to be the head boss there. And so I talked to them about that, and they're like, what can we do? We don't want you to go. I was like, well, unless you make me the head man of the entire firm, I can't do what I want to do here. So you shouldn't take it personally. I'm not going to some other firm. I'm not going to transfer across the street to another big law firm. I really want to, kind of decide how I'm going to do my practice and what's going to be what I focus on. So yeah, I started my own thing in 2021. And so here we are 2 years later, still going, and getting to work with people like you is one of the things I think is great.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
No, we work well together. I know, I think I told you, there are only a handful of people I will co-counsel with. And that's from being burnt, badly in the past. We have mutual friends, and that's how we met. But I think we work well together. It's not always the case, though.
That's true. No. Yeah.
And you're the outgoing president for Wilkie D. Ferguson Jr. Bar Association, formerly the Black Lawyers Association.
Yes.
You did a great job this year. I know I didn't attend all of the events, but
yes. No, well, I appreciate that. It was fun, and I have 2 more weeks technically to be the president, and then Terry Ann Howell will then become the president. We actually met last night to go over some strategic planning for her year, and that was productive. But it was a great experience. It really helped me a lot in terms of my leadership abilities, understanding, management, managing people, managing lawyers. We could always stand to become better at that if we're going to be leaders and be lawyers. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to have served, and looking forward to continuing to serve as immediate past president on the board.
Did you ever meet Judge Ferguson?
I didn't. He passed away before I kind of got back down here working. So I've heard a lot of stories about him and spent a lot of time with his wife, but I never got a chance to meet him.
He was an awesome person, an awesome judge. I was supposed to clerk for him. And he passed away 3 weeks before I was supposed to start.
Wow.
And Judge Huck called me up. Paul Huck, he said, well, I heard you were supposed to clerk for Judge Ferguson, and I want to tell you, if he chose you, then, you can come clerk for me. I was like, okay. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people, because Judge Huck is not the warm and fuzzy guy. But he really is. He really is underneath it. He's a very sweet guy. But what he didn't know was that I pulled some strings with Judge Ferguson, who was friends of friends, and went to his door one day, knocked on his door, and handed him my application. And I said, I need to clerk for you because I think you're the right judge for me to clerk for. And he just kind of looked at me. He's like, you got some guts, young lady. And so,
wow.
So that's how we kind of met and started. But he I was part of the association when we got the name changed back in the day. And so, I think rightfully so. He was just really one of the great judges here in the Southern District. I wish we had some more.
Sure.
But we'll talk about that.
We're working on that.
Yeah, but with Judge Cook gone now,
It's tough.
It's tough. It's tough practicing in the federal circuit down here.
There's going to be a press release that comes out either today or sometime in the coming days that you'll see about some things that are happening about making that right.
Okay. So, hopefully they make it right, because that's a big, those are some big shoes to fill. But I wanted to have you on really to talk about the indictment of former President Donald Trump.
Sure.
I've read the indictment. I don't think I'm qualified to really tell the people about the indictment. I think you're better qualified to do that. I'm also very biased because I do not like this guy. I don't like what he's done to our country. And also, in my opinion, in reading this indictment, I feel he has placed our national security at risk, which is my greater concern, putting politics aside. So tell me your thoughts about the indictment, the 37 felony counts.
So in the nomenclature that we use, the Department of Justice, and in any federal context, there are a couple of different ways that you can prepare an indictment. You can have a very bare bones indictment that simply says that this defendant violated this law on this day. So say we all. Boom. And that's it. And all the facts that underlie the indictment will come out later.
Right.
This indictment, by contrast, is what we call a speaking indictment, where the government, the prosecutors, actually specifically lay out all of the facts. Well, I shouldn't say all, but a large majority of the facts that underlie the crimes that have been charged in the actual indictment. And this one is one that is probably as detailed as any.
I was very surprised by that. Well, on one hand, I wasn't, because I feel like they did need to lay out the details because of who he is and because of the effect it will have, on certain members of the public.
Right.
I do have a friend who works for the U.S. Attorney's Office, and and I don't know her political beliefs, but she expressed to me that she felt like her department was getting weaponized because she feels that they're sort of, this indictment was so detailed and they haven't done this for other people, and she and I kind of had some back and forth on it, because I said, of course it's detailed. Of course it's, it's a little bit different because of who it is. Like, it has to be. What are your thoughts on that?
So I don't agree with that, right? Like, this isn't the first speaking indictment that's ever been filed in the history of the nation. There have been plenty of them. I've done them, they do them in all different types of cases. And I think part of the reason why you do it is because in certain instances, everyone's going to call into question the legitimacy of the case. And if you were to do just a plain bare bones indictment, people would say, oh, they don't have anything. This is all
a witch hunt.
A witch hunt. This is a political thing. This is persecution. No. These are actual facts that are based upon statements that other people have given, based upon photographs that were taken in the actual location where the crime was committed, which is Mar-a-Lago. Those were included in the indictment.
Right.
You have people who gave testimony before the grand jury saying that they had conversations with the former president where he instructed them to not comply with a subpoena that was issued by the United States government for certain documents, information, and he willfully and intentionally ignored it and disregarded the instructions that were given to him. And then after he was caught, he even further ignored it and disregarded it. And it took a subpoena for them going in to basically raid his residence to find an additional like 117 boxes or so of documents, which I don't see how anyone who's being fair and objective could say is a witch hunt or that this is a weaponization of any, I would say, prosecutorial arm of the government. I think there's a lot of evidence here that would, at the very least, give the government probable cause to charge the former president with these crimes.
talk to me a little bit, and to the listeners a little bit, about how grand juries work, because this isn't the Biden administration just bringing up these charges, because they feel like it, right? A grand jury actually has to hear the evidence and vote on this. So
That's right.
talk to a little bit about that process.
Right. So, there are two ways that you can charge a crime. You can charge by information, which is basically where the government just lays out, the allegations itself in a charging document. That's how most cases are charged. If you go into a store and do a stick up, they don't have to do a whole grand jury. They just put it in the charging document and charge you. And there's also the grand jury. Certain crimes you have to present to the grand jury. And a grand jury is basically an assembly of people, usually around 18 to 24. They come into a room and the government produces evidence by way of testimony, documents, and otherwise, and they present an indictment to the grand jury that they have to vote on and approve. It's not a rubber stamp. They actually have to vote on and approve the indictment. And these people are made up of a cross-section of individuals in the community, not from any particular political party. And as you might guess, here in South Florida, I would venture to say that some of those people probably belong to the same party as the former president.
Right.
And they found it, was like they used to say in the church, they found it not robbery to go ahead and indict the former
You're a preacher's kid. I got to let the audience know that. You're
exactly,
a preacher's kid.
Right? They did, it wasn't beyond the pale for them to vote on each and every one of those counts. It's not like, well, if you get 2 or 3, we can throw the rest of them in. 37 count indictment, which includes charges for obstruction of justice, violation of the Espionage Act, lying to federal officials, which is 18 USC section 1001. And these things carry penalties up to 20 years, some of them 5 years, all of them are more than a year. So this is a very serious indictment, and it's based upon facts, not make believe. There's not magic. There's no pixie dust that was sprinkled on this document. This is real deal stuff. The question is ultimately going to be whether the former president of the United States can be found guilty, I think, of these things based upon his position, what he knew, what he thought he was doing, his mental state. We call it mens rea, and that just means like his mental state at the time, what he intended to do. But he did it. Like, there's no question that he kept these documents. The question will be whether he had the right to, under the circumstances, and whether he really endangered the United States in the way that they've accused him. And I think
well, one of the alarming things I read was that he had operational maps of ongoing military operations. I'm a military kid, so that was one of the things that stood out to me. And then his maintenance of documents regarding nuclear information.
Yeah.
Those are serious, right? Like, I think we all joke that Trump is nuts, etc. But when I saw that in the indictment, I'm like, man, this guy, as much as he claims to be a patriot, what is the reason for holding on to documents like that? Right. Well, I mean, I have my assumptions, but.
Right. It to me, it really comes down to what has been emblematic of his personality from the get. And that is, it's about him. Everything is about him. He's the most important person in every room, in every place now in the world, in his view. And so there's no one who can tell him what he can and cannot do, not even the government of the United States of America. He's quintessentially someone who believes that he is above the law. Yeah. And now, unfortunately for him, someone has come back and said, no, you are not. Right. And that's what this indictment is. It's telling him he's not above the law.
Quick question on grand juries. Are they pulled just the way you get pulled for jury duty?
Yeah.
Do you know? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So usually by your driver's license or voter registration.
Yep.
All right. I hope the public is hearing this, because it's one thing I preach on this podcast is please make sure your voter registration and your driver's license are up to date, because we need good people on juries.
Please. It's so important. Like, these things matter. You matter so much more than you think. And your participation in the civic process is really what makes your presence here in the United States so meaningful. And if you're going to be here and not participate, then it's like, what's the point?
What's the point? What do you think are the most detrimental counts in this indictment?
So I think they're all pretty damning, but the ones that I think will be the most thorny for him are the ones where you have actual witnesses who will testify that he told them essentially to violate the law and
Right.
to work with him in violating the law. Because that kind of testimony, when you get into a trial and you have an actual live witness who gets up and says that this defendant instructed me to do this thing, and he was a president of the United States at a time,
Mm-hmm.
like that is just the most obvious abuse of power. If you're going to break the law, just do it yourself. But once you start involving other people and conspiring with them and, you know, trying to manipulate systems, then I think that's what's going to be really problematic for him. So the counts that involve conspiracy, the counts that involve obstruction of justice, because it's one thing to say, okay, I didn't understand the Espionage Act, or I didn't understand the level of power that I had to either maintain or, you know, disclose secret documents. Sure, maybe you didn't understand that. What you did understand is when you told that person, hey, disregard that subpoena. Hey, find a way to get these documents out of the box that's going to be collected because I don't want those to go over.
Right.
That shows a level of willfulness that is going to be really, really hard to explain away.
And if I'm not mistaken, one of the witnesses is his former attorney,
That's right.
which
Right.
I mean, is damning in itself, because you and I know we're not out to testify against a client in no means, right?
Right. Ever.
Ever.
And there is also the whole issue of the attorney-client privilege that the court would, you know, permitted the government to disregard under the crime fraud exception, because normally
Right.
those things are protected.
Right.
But if the communications are made in the context of committing a crime or fraud, then the attorney-client privilege is eviscerated. And that's what happened here. So can
Yeah.
you imagine if
Right.
in some of our shared clients, if some of those communications were ever to come to light, it would totally blow certain things out of the water. And we
Right.
would never want to see that happen. That's the point of having an attorney, is like going to confessional with your priest is like, I can tell you anything and not worry about it getting out. So I'm going to
Correct.
say things to you that I wouldn't say to anybody else.
Yeah.
And then guess what? All that's been flipped on his head and it's coming out now. So it looks really bad.
So well, you talked a little bit about the court. Aileen Cannon is the Southern District Judge who's been assigned to this case. I did a little intro that talks about how they are randomly assigned cases in the Southern District. She happens to be a Trump appointed judge. I have my thoughts on her. I know we may both have cases in front of her at some point. So we need to be a little careful. But the facts are she was a Trump nominee, that she has made some rulings in the past with regard to subpoenas and et cetera that make her look biased. The government has not moved to recuse her or disqualify her just yet. Do you think that's coming down the pipeline?
I doubt it.
Why?
Because it's a battle that they will likely lose. Judges have such expansive discretion about their ability to be fair that it's very, very, very rare that a court of appeals would overturn a judge's decision to stay on the case. And so if you go ahead and start that battle with the judge and you lose it, then you're stuck with the judge that you tried to have recused. I think you and I talked about it in the case before, on one of our cases.
Yep.
With a certain judge that you had some things with in the past. And we talked about whether we, you know, strategically, are we going to put ourselves in harm's way if we try to get him off and then he doesn't want to get off. So it's the same thing.
He was going to hold that against me. Thank God we didn't get assigned to him.
Exactly. And so I think in this situation, I expect the government to just live with it, you know, and if they have to deal with certain things on appeal, certain rulings, interlocutory, like that means things that while the case is still going on, you can appeal, then they will, right? Because if they do move to recuse her and that she says no, then it's going to be probably hell to pay.
Yeah. And I think she will say no if asked.
I think she will too. And I think that rulings that she's made, while they seem to be kind of biased, unless you do something to show that you're clearly like having inappropriate conduct or contact with one of the parties, or that you are in some group that is like, we want this, and you're in it chanting there as well, I don't think the rules say you have to recuse yourself. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd be surprised unless she voluntarily does it. I don't see it happening.
Well, let me ask you this. Can you tell the listeners sort of what the timeline of cases like these look like?
So under ordinary circumstances, you could have an indictment come down and the trial happen in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
But this is not an ordinary circumstance because you're dealing with 37 count indictment, former president of the United States, big team of lawyers that he will assemble who will file motions to exclude every piece of evidence that they've ever submitted in this case. You're gonna have to deal with, issues with the press, publicity, him coming in and out of court. How's that gonna happen? Where is the trial gonna happen? Will it be in Palm Beach? Will it be in Fort Pierce? Because Judge Cannon often sits in Fort Pierce. Will it be in Miami at the main courthouse? Will it be in Florida? I think that they're going to the Trump team will challenge everything, and that will make the case last a lot longer. So I envision it between a year to 18 months at least.
Right before the 2024 election.
Correct. Which then creates another issue where he may try to push it beyond that.
Of course. Of course, so that he can run, which we're, God forbid he wins. We're talking about trying a potential president of the United States, which, right. We are really a banana republic at this point.
Yeah, it's so bad. I mean, you and I, who have plenty of things to do and are busy people, but not even anywhere close to how busy a president of the United States would be, don't have time to be on trial. Like, can you imagine if you had to do your job, focus on all the things that you have to do, and then at the same time be on trial for a 37 count indictment?
Right.
Not a good look.
Well, I hope to have you back during this trial to talk to the listeners and kind of explain it exactly the way you have, just very easy, because I think people get lost in the weeds of things. Media is very biased on one side or the other. And so having someone to really talk about these issues from experience, and from a legal standpoint, without any sort of bias, I think is very, very important. I know you have to run. Tell the listeners how to reach you. What's your Instagram, any other social media?
Yep. For sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Rhea. This has been great. I appreciate you. You're welcome. And all the people who follow your show, thank you for listening. I listen and I will continue to listen, especially to this episode.
You better.
But no, I definitely appreciate it. You can email me if anybody has questions about any of this stuff at chris@lomaxlegal.com. That's CHRIS @LOMAXLEGAL.com. And our office's number is 305-582-6506. And on Instagram, my personal page is C Lomax, that's CEE Lomax, and my firm is Lomax Legal. So at LOMAX.
At Lomax Legal.
Yep.
You're giving out your personal Instagram. You're good.
Yeah, man. It's, I do things. So some of that stuff I don't put on the firm page because I'm trying to make it less about me. Now we have people working at the firm. So you might, if you want to look for me, then check out my personal one, look at the firm, then you have that as well.
And you've also been featured on the news lately. So keep a lookout for Chris Lomax. I saw you, I think it was Channel 10.
Yeah, I did 10 and we did 4. So yeah, we're doing some stuff on the Trump indictment recently and other things that talked about the Supreme Court case about redistricting and gerrymandering in Miami crimes. So it's busy, but the people need to know, and I'm glad to shed any light on anything I can.
Perfect. Well, Chris, thank you so much. We will have you back on. I do want to do, I did earlier a podcast on redistricting, but with this Supreme Court case, I really need to do a podcast on that. So I may reach out to you for that.
I'm down.
All right, man. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, my friend. Have a good day.
All right.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend wherever you get your podcasts and tell a friend. You can also follow the podcast on our social media pages.